Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 3. In this video, I will be reviewing all of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Season 3 of Discovery up to the very end. If you haven't seen all of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So I was a bit disappointed in this season. Now, and I've talked about this in my reviews for the last couple episodes of the season, because that's when I started to realize that the season wasn't going to get really as good as I hoped it would get. Now, to be fair, before season 3 was airing, and when I heard they're setting it 1,000 years in the future and all that, and I wasn't that interested in it. Some photos were coming out and stuff, and I wasn't really looking at them or looking at the spoilers. Apparently they were talking to the producers instead. Interviews and stuff were talking about the burn, so there was all the speculation about the burn before the season even came out. And I didn't pay any attention. I gleaned some of that talk, but I didn't pay any attention to it because I wasn't that interested in the show. Certain shows The Expanse, or, back in the day when it used to be good, Game of Thrones, between seasons, I would, seek out, any information I possibly could and shove it into my head, and I'd be, jonesing for a fix and waiting, desperately for the show to come out, and when the trailer drops, I'd be oh my god! This trailer for The Expanse Season 5, when that dropped, I watched it, maybe 50 times in a row, when the first day it dropped, and then another 50 the next day, and probably watched it a couple hundred times, and I was oh my god, and I was so excited. And when the trailer for Discovery Season 3 dropped, I probably waited a week, and I was I guess I'll watch it. Watched it once and forgot about it. Just mentioning and just bringing this up to say I wasn't all that excited about the show. Now, and the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of people say, and may still say after they watch this review, that I had my expectations that high. But really they weren't, because I wasn't jonesing for Discovery Season 3. And I wouldn't say I felt like it was a burden to watch it. I was curious. I was, probably the best term, cautiously optimistic. I was hoping it would be good, but I was preparing for it to be bad. And here's the thing. The first 5 episodes lured me into a false sense of hope. This is similar to Game of Thrones Season 8, where the first 2 episodes were actually decent, or actually pretty good, so they lured me into a false sense of hope that they might actually be able to pull off the season, and then that all just went downhill into a shit show after that. Now, granted, what Discovery did is not nearly as bad as what the final season of Game of Thrones did, not even close, but it did kind of go downhill after that 5th episode, at least in my humble opinion. I think because, and I was talking about this in my review of the first 5 episodes, well, barring episode 1, because I wasn't very impressed with episode 1, I should say, starting with episode 2, 2 through 5. 1, it seemed like it was just trying too hard to be Star Wars. I mean, so many people were making comparison how it was pretty much out and out Star Wars. But anyway, Booker was so Han Solo. I think I called him a nerf herder. You scruffy looking nerf herder in my review. Anyway, so but those episodes 2 through 5, I was actually really loving, because it was having a nice pace. It seemed, because one of my complaints about the first 2 seasons of Discovery is that it wasn't handling serialization storytelling very well, the long form story arc, because it's actually, I wouldn't say it's something Star Trek has never done before, because it has. Even Next Generation has done it in some form or fashion, not consecutively, but there would be ongoing storylines like the Borg and the Q and Barclay and whatnot. But more specifically, Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, where Deep Space Nine had several arcs that took place over 7. Well, there was one that was 7 episodes, and there was another that was 10 episodes. And even within that, there was the Dominion War story arc that came in off and on throughout the last 2 seasons of the show. And even going earlier in that, you had arcs, a lot of character arcs that built and went throughout the season. Now, Voyager is actually notorious for avoiding that kind of storytelling, and most people agree to its detriment, that it would have been a much better show had they not avoided it. And Enterprise, of course, was actually consecutive throughout, even the first 2 seasons, which weren't very good. But then you had the 3rd season, which was probably the most noted before Discovery, pre-Discovery example of Star Trek having a full-on serialized season of television. But season 4 was a bit different, where it had like a bunch of 2-parters and 3-parters, which I've never seen it, but people will tell me that resembles Doctor Who. Yeah, no, I've never seen Doctor Who. It doesn't really interest me. But anyway, so all that is to say that doing serialized storytelling is not, I guess it's not commonplace to Star Trek, but it's not new. Like, it's been done in Star Trek before. And it seems to me that Discovery is just doing a bad job at it. And this was the case with Season 1 and Season 2, where I think there was a lot of flaws and issues. I talked in Season 2 at length about how it took like 6 episodes to find Spock, and they seemed to prolong things. And I was really liking Season 3 of Discovery because those episodes 2 through 5 were actually doing a really great job of telling like a serialized format. And part of the reason is why is that it wasn't unnecessarily pushing back or prolonging things. Like, they wanted to find Earth, so they go to Earth, and then they want to go to Trill, they go to Trill, then they want to find the Federation, they find the Federation. Like, boom, 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 consecutive storytelling instead of taking 6 episodes to find Spock or some bullshit like that. And it was a really good pace until then. And then we got to the mid-season episodes 6, 7, 8, and they would just meander. And they would just repeat that. Like, they repeated the storyline with Booker being under attack twice. First like on some, like, being held captive on some stupid prison planet, and then later on his home planet or whatever, where they just repeated the same beats. And then there wasn't really a through story after Discovery joined with the Federation. And this is maybe a problem with the pacing, which I thought was great at first, but now looking at the season back in retrospect, I realized that they kind of went too fast. And then once they got to the middle of the season, it kind of ran out of things to do. They just blew through it, and so they were just meandering. And the only thread after Discovery found the Federation, the only thread holding the season together is what happened to the burn. What caused the burn, which was the big mystery, and even the producers announced that it was the big mystery of the season. And I really honestly do not, even though other people may have various different opinions, I honestly don't think that it's a matter of me having my expectations too high. I think the show is what told me to expect this to be a good payoff. The show itself. Because that's what it was hanging the whole. That was the only thread left after Discovery joined the Federation. Was what was the cause of the burn. So they were hanging the entire season basically on that question. That was the driving mystery of the season. It's not me. It's not my personal interpretation or expectation. The show itself was saying, making that the most important question, making that the mystery box, making that the what is the island or what is the monster scenario. The what is the burn was the only driving force of the season, and they would drop tiny hints here and there, and this became like the Spock thing in season 2, where they just prolonged it, and they would have like a 2-minute scene in one episode, and then a 2-minute scene in another episode, maybe a 5-minute scene in the next episode, and then have a 2-part about the mirror universe where they didn't address the burn at all. And then finally, in the last 3 episodes, they resolved what caused the burn. And it was very underwhelming. Incredibly underwhelming. And again, I don't think this is a case of me having my expectations too high. I think this is a case of the show itself building this whole entire season on this mystery, and when they solve it, it's like, really? That's it? So a commenter in one of my videos said, okay, so what they've been asking, so what caused the burn basically was a man-child yelling. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I actually didn't mind the Sakal storyline, and I think it had an interesting character interactions and implications for Saru, but it was not interesting enough to hang the entire season on. In fact, not just the entire season, but the whole setting of the 32nd century where they came. Like, this whole setting was about post-burn, where there was no dilithium, and it affected, it's like a post-apocalyptic sort of landscape where the Federation has been really diminished, and interstellar travel is at a minimum, and most people are like, so the area where all these races were inhabiting like really shrunk because of the burn, and we find out that it was caused by a man-child yelling. And I really don't think that's good enough. And plus, the explanation they give in the show itself that Sakal was tied in, his DNA was tied into dilithium, and it operates on subspace and whatever. That's a bunch of technobabble nonsense. It's magic, basically. I mean, not that that's new to Star Trek, but I don't know. A lot of times I'll give the technobabble in Star Trek a pass because they use it for effective storytelling. This, I don't know. I don't think it was effective storytelling, so I'm less willing to give it a pass, to be honest. Now, to be clear, I did not hate this season. I said it was disappointing, but that's because I was expecting it to be good. And I think, as I said, those episodes 2 through 5 earned that expectation. That's what gave me that expectation for being so good. Now, also, I was hoping, even before season 3 aired, as I said, I was hoping this season would be the breakthrough season for the show, because I don't think season 1 and 2 of Discovery is horrible. Like, you'll have a lot of other YouTubers out who will say it's absolute trash, which I disagree with. I don't. And don't get me started about those who say it's not Star Trek, where clearly it is. Although I will admit, even within the season, there are moments and episodes that didn't feel like Star Trek, but that doesn't mean Discovery is not Star Trek. It clearly is. But I mean, there's other episodes and moments that really felt like Star Trek. But that is to say, the issues with season 1 and 2 is that there were a lot of great things that I loved about the season, but at the same time, there were a lot of horrible things, way too many flaws, and so it ends up being sort of a mixed bag. Now, the bag, I would say, is mostly positive, particularly when it comes to season 2. I would say overall it was a good show, but it, as I said, it's not a great show. It's not like I'm dying with anticipation for it to come out like it would an actual great show like The Expanse. but it's not a terrible show. It's overall a good show, and that's a show I want to keep watching because there are a lot of great moments. There are great character moments, and there are great storytelling moments, but it's hindered by all the flaws. The main flaws being failure to tell serialized storytelling, and an overabundance of melodrama and over sentimentality. And the thing is that season 3 didn't improve on those particular issues. Now, there's another issue of the show focusing too much on Michael Burnham being the center of the universe, which season 3 did improve on. Mostly. She was still the center of attention, but it wasn't like she could do no wrong and everything revolved around her like the way that she turned out to be the Red Angel in season 2. And so at least they could have repeated that and had her be the reason for the burn, and that would have been awful. But I mean, to me, that's only a slight improvement because she was still, the center of attention, particularly in those last 3 episodes where she became John McClane and single-handedly saved the day. Well, maybe not single-handedly, but almost. Anyway, the main issues though that the first 2 seasons had of not having good pacing, not telling serialized stories very, very well, hanging the season on the mysteries where the resolution was not all that interesting, and so the whole season seems a bit hollow and uninteresting, having too much like melodrama and overly independent where the characters get extremely emotional in ways that the storytelling did not at all earn, so it seems melodrama for the sake of melodrama and not realistic, and the audience usually feels, or at least I would say a lot of the audience do feel that this melodrama is entirely unearned and seems a bit sappy and fake. All of those issues are still here in season 3. It did not resolve any of those issues, and that's what I find really disappointing, because here's the thing. I think this show needed to improve. I mean, surely there's definitely going to be season 4, and I think maybe even the season 5, and there's still possibility it could improve on those 2 seasons, but I doubt it. I think the show needed to improve because, I don't know, I think a lot of cases if a show doesn't improve by season 3, it's not going to. Now, that's not a blanket. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule. Some people think that Deep Space Nine didn't get good till season 4, but those people are objectively wrong. Season 3 is when it got good. Sorry to let you know. And anyway, just like Next Generation and Enterprise and Deep Space Nine, they all got good at season 3. And so that's. I mean, I was hoping that it's a Star Trek show that it would follow the same formula. I mean, but it's not just because it's a Star Trek show. I think any show, like if it's not good by its 3rd season, then it's probably not. And it really doesn't. I don't see any signs of it changing, of it overcoming those issues that I mentioned. It's better to telling serialized stories better, having maybe not hanging the entire season on a mystery, especially if you can't come up with an interesting enough resolution, and not having this over sentimentality. And they promised me that they would develop these side characters more, but they didn't really. I mean, maybe they developed them a bit more than they were in the first 2 seasons, but they're still underdeveloped. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people point out, well, it's okay to have background characters like Sulu and Uhura were barely developed in the original series, let's be fair. But the problem is that the show acts like the audience is invested in these characters and cares about them when the show hasn't earned any investment. A prime example of that, again, is going back to season 2, where they had Ariam's death. Now, that episode where they dealt with Ariam's death, I think the singular episode was a self-contained story that worked on its own. But then the following episode, it had like this 10-minute funeral sequence where everyone was singing for a character that the audience barely knew and does not care about. So that was entirely unearned. And even though season 3 didn't do anything as bad as that, it had the storyline with Detmer going through PTSD, which I thought, oh, they're going to flesh out Detmer's character more. But they didn't really. It felt like that storyline felt really underdeveloped, underused. Like she just got pissed off and yelled at Stamets at a dinner, and then they kind of dropped it after that. It's the whole thing seemed like it was underdeveloped, really, and that they kind of just gave up on it. And the other characters, I don't even know their names. Other random characters, like they just, have a few lines in the background, and then we're expected to really care about them. Now let me getting into more specifics. Let me get into some of these new characters. We have Booker or Book. I'm not sure which one. Sometimes Sauer always calls him Booker, but I think Burnham calls him Book. But whatever. He was granted, I definitely think, especially in that first episode, he was a total Han Solo type. But they did develop him a bit more. They actually said he was an empath, which is interesting. He could communicate with species. And that was a pretty interesting concept. But again, I do feel like this character was a bit underdeveloped. Like we know that he keeps getting in prison or having to be rescued or having to go to his home planet and rescue people. But I feel like, and even that episode where they showed his brother, whatever, like I didn't really care much because I didn't think he was that developed. Although I will say I think that his chemistry with Michael Burnham was good. As I said, it's this whole thing about this show is that there's so great stuff mixed in with some terrible stuff. And yeah, so his chemistry with Burnham worked, so I don't think this is a bad character. I just think maybe they could have developed him a bit more, and I didn't really care about him as much as maybe the show. So Adira was an interesting character. I actually think they worked really well as a character. I thought their storyline was really interesting this season. Especially towards the beginning when they were learning to connect with being a Trill and connecting, even though they were human, they had a Trill symbiont. Although the whole reveal that any species could take Trill symbionts is, I think that's really, I'm not on board with that. But really inconsistent with DS9. But anyway, like when they went to Trill as a DS9 fan, and that was like really hit my nostalgia buttons. But in the best way possible. But I thought Adira's storyline was actually interesting. How they were kind of adopted by Stamets and Culber. Like I actually thought that worked. I actually liked Adira's relationship with them, and how they would talk to Gray, and they could see him, but no one else could. And I love how Stamets like really did believe them when Adira said that they could see Gray. Stamets immediately was on board. Like, and I don't think he was humoring them. I think he outright like trusted them immediately, and I like that. I liked Adira's relationship with Culber and Stamets. And the whole storyline was great. I think well, Gray as a character maybe could have been fleshed out a little bit more. And again, this whole thing with the music, that it seemed like a huge letdown. I mean, it did connect ultimately with Sakal, but I think, to me, I was expecting something a lot more metaphysical and deeper rather than just some random Kelpian, which what a happy convenience that it happens to be Kelpian, but whatever. But ultimately, I did like Adira as a character. Maybe they could have been fleshed out a bit more, but ultimately, I think they did really work. And then you have, speaking of new characters, you got Vance, the Admiral. I actually liked him as an Admiral. I think because Star Trek is notorious for having asshole admirals, where at times he could be antagonistic, but you could kind of understand where he was coming from. And I actually think he worked he actually reminded me of, as the season went on, the kind of relationship Discovery had with him reminded me of Admiral Forrest over on Enterprise, how he was the staple admiral, how they had a single admiral who was always like talking to Archer, and it seems like it's the same thing here, where it was Vance was always talking to Saru and Discovery. And I actually like that. I like that dynamic. That was one of the things I actually did like about Enterprise, and I like that dynamic here. And I like that even though he's not a straight out villain or asshole like many admirals in Star Trek tend to be, he was adversarial, but you understood where he was coming from because after the Federation and Starfleet had been decimated and reduced to like a fraction of what it used to be, to the point where even Earth wasn't a member anymore. And yet, so you could understand how he'd be really cautious, and how the spore drive is an invaluable resource, and so how he would not be on board with the Discovery going off willy-nilly on crazy issues. So I actually like this character a lot. I think he did work very well. That is until the end, when he started to interact with Osira. So let me get into Osira, who is the main villain of this season, and I really don't think she worked at all. I think this is definitely one of the low points of the season. First of all, they didn't really develop her anymore. The whole thing with the chain, like they mentioned him, like I think they first started mentioning him in the first episode, and they drop hints about them throughout. But they never really felt well established to me. They weren't like the Dominion or the Xindi or the Borg or the Romulans that were really well developed villains, or the Cardassians. They just felt like this random, here's the random bad guy of the week or of the season. And Osira in particular was definitely a mustache-twirling villain. And especially what really lost me is the scene where they showed her killing her nephew for no good reason. I mean, that's such a cliche, stereotypical, just to prove that she's a villain. So then when they had that scene towards the end of the season where she was trying to unite the chain and the Federation, like that whole thing did not work for me at all, because I couldn't buy it, because they portrayed her as so much as a two-dimensional villain, and the chain was like this crime organization. All of a sudden they're portraying it as like almost a federation with like science scholarships and all and trade routes and all this, and I'm like, and then of course at the end of the season, after she dies, the chain just crumbles. Really? Like this huge organization that had all these like institutions crumbles because one person dies. I don't know. I just think her whole story arc was very mishandled, and I did not find her an interesting villain. I did not find the chain an interesting villain. In fact, I didn't really care about them at all. Now, that is not to say that I didn't enjoy some of these action scenes towards the end of the season, because I most certainly did. As much as I like to poke fun at the Michael Burnham Die Hard stuff, I actually enjoyed that. I actually felt that worked, and I felt that the action sequences in the finale were definitely way better than the action sequences in the season 2 finale, which was, CGI diarrhea. But yeah, so again, it's always good and bad with Discovery. They could do one good thing, but they have to follow up with another bad thing. And then, like for example, those dot robot things that were introduced in the short trek. Apparently, they appeared in the finale, season 2 finale, but I didn't even notice them. And they had in the sphere data, they kind of kept pumping up the sphere data as well. I guess they're kind of leading. A lot of people think they're leading to the Calypso short, but I don't know if that's still coming or not. But so in the penultimate episode of the season, they had those robots come up and we're with you, and then they didn't really do anything at all. So it seemed like a huge disappointment to me. And they were in the credits, they show them in the credits, but they didn't really appear until the very end, and they were played it off. Even I was excited. I was oh my god, these things are gonna be awesome. And then they just get shot and don't really do anything. So that was a disappointment. Now, should I talk about Tilly? I feel like I've ranted so much about Tilly in my episode reviews. I'm kind of sick of talking about it. But, if you haven't watched my episode reviews, I think it's the most ridiculous thing in the world that she was promoted to first officer and then became acting captain. She's a cadet. She was just learning. There's a lot of people there with more experience than her who are way more qualified than her. There's probably tons of people. And I think honestly think this might have been the nail in the coffin in the season that would make me think that season 2 is better than season 3. Because I think it really irreparably damaged the show to the point where I can't take anything seriously anymore. I talked about the Kelvin movies, where they had that issue too, where they sucked at world building and just random shit happened. And there was no rhyme or logic behind it. And I don't think Discovery was like that until this moment. That they made, because I compared it to the 2009 Star Trek, where Kirk got promoted from a cadet to the captain of a starship, which enraged me. I thought that was the biggest flaw in any motion picture ever. Well, at least decent ones. I'm not talking about horrible B movies or the really bad ones. But yeah, that's definitely the biggest flaw in any movie ever. And I think what they did with Tilly was worse. Honestly. Because at least Kirk was competent. I can't really say the same for Tilly. After she did take command, she was just bumbling. Her conversations with Sarah, oh yeah, blah, blah. It just made me cringe so badly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't hate Tilly as a character. I thought she worked well as the loudmouth ensign, and I like her chemistry with Burnham and Stamets. But she just should not be the fucking first officer or captain. I can't take this whole show I can't take it seriously, especially in that final episode where she was their commander leading them. I'm just that's so dumb. She shouldn't be a leader. Why is the show doing this? Because she's the main character there. It's the world building universe lost all credibility in my eyes, and which leads to Michael Burnham becoming the captain at the end of the season, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to complain about. Me personally, I was sure. Why not? I mean, Tilly can be the first officer. Why not make Burnham the captain? Who cares? I just lost all sort of interest and sense of logic. It's basically a turn off your brain, the way the Kelvin movies were. And Star Trek has never been turn off your brain. And so I do think that is the nail in the coffin that does make me think that season 3 was not as good as season 2, mainly because of that. Yeah, I just Don't know what to say. Now, again, there's a lot of great stuff I did like about the season. Like, I love in the final episodes the way Stamets was, like, heartbroken and he desperately wanted to get back to Culber and Adira at all costs. And Burnham had to, like, shoot him out the ship to prevent the chain from getting him, and the way that he was like spinning venom at her and being like, after what we did for you, we want for the, like, that was amazing. I thought that was a great, that was actually melodrama that was well earned, that I actually think really, really worked. But yeah. Oh, I didn't even talk about Giorgio. I actually didn't hate her two-part. In fact, I kind of think it justified her character, and I think it was a great character story for her. It just has a lot of people pointed out it was kind of oddly placed towards the end of the season when they should be building towards the finale, and because it was such an aside that didn't have anything to do with anything, and the whole reveal of the Guardian Forever, I'm like, I love The Guardian Forever. I'm happy to see it again, but the way they sort of played it, especially by bringing back the original audio from the City on the Edge Forever, I think that was really cheesy. I'm sorry. That was a dumb moment. I didn't like it, although I do like seeing the special effects on The Guardian Forever, but yeah, whatever. Anyway, my rating for Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery out of 10, I'm going to give this a 7. Very good. This is pretty much what I've been giving all of Discovery and Picard. It's disappointing. It's more disappointing than Season 2 because I think this had more potential. I think if they would have played their cards right, this could have been like an amazing season. This could have improved the show. I still believe, like, a few changes here and there, it could have been like one of the best seasons of Star Trek. Like, I don't think the Foundation is poisoned the way that Enterprise was, which did manage to make one of the best seasons of Star Trek, even though the Foundation was poisoned. But like, I think the Foundation's there. Like, they have strong characters. They have an interesting premise. Especially this season was a very interesting premise. They just floundered it. They just failed to deliver. And they let all the same flaws, same issues that have been plaguing the show since the very beginning are still there. They have not overcome them. Or at least the main ones. So, there you go. Anyway, that is it for my review of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. Thank you so much for watching this video, and be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other Star Trek shows and episodes and whatnot. And I cover other shows like The Expanse, Breaking Bad, The Outer Limits, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.